little more stuff there. At least a message. You might call this a message and a half. I was preparing a message, and then I had an inspiration about something else that I wanted to share. And then I realized that it fit together. And I really didn't want to separate these things. So get comfortable, settle back, get ready. Here we go. All right. I'm excited about these. I'm praying, I'm believing that God is going to provide a balm through what I'm going to be sharing today. That is going to heal some hurts. It's going to help change some attitudes. It's going to help strengthen His people here today. So I'm excited about the opportunity in that. This was a message I thought I was going to be giving at Little Genesee about 2 weeks ago. And it was on their it was on their bulletin. And they had it lined up in Friday afternoon, and I said, this isn't for them. I've got to do a different message tomorrow because this isn't their message. And Beth said, okay, so this is going to be a long night, right? I said, yeah, it's going to be one of those nights. So they had the message that was for them the next day, I believe, and they appreciated it. It was what they needed there. But I think this is the message for you guys. And I was excited about this message because this was a message I didn't really know was in here. It's a little story at the first chapter of Samuel, and it talks a lot about Hannah. You can turn there and follow along if you want, but I'm going to be reading through the story, and we're going to talk about what's going on and see how this applies to our lives. As we open the book of Samuel, we find a certain man named Elkanah. Okay, has kind of a cool name. Verse 2, it says he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah. The name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. So we start off with a challenge. Okay? We could probably do a sermon just on having multiple wives and the challenges of that. But this opens up for me the situation that's going on in their life. I want to imagine what it is to be Hannah. Okay? Just in this situation, she's one of 2 wives, which that means either she was the first wife or she was the second wife. Right? And it doesn't say here which she was. But if she was the second wife, that means he had already become one flesh with a woman. Right? They were married. Now they have children. And she is a second wife. Right? Who wants to be second choice wife? Right? You want to be, in a marriage, the wife, the other half of who you're married to. Right? So it would be a tough situation for Hannah to be in, to be wife number 2. Okay? I think the more likely event is that Hannah was his first wife, however. Right? And it says here that she had no children. And we know in that culture there was a high priority on having children. Someone to carry on, right? Someone to bring your name forward, right? Your legacy, your family was very important, right? So Hannah gave him no children. So he took a second wife, right? That means you were the wife of disappointment. You were the wife he had hoped to be the wife that was with him, that would carry on the family name, to be that wife. But that's apparently not going to be you. So you were first, but now you're the wife that didn't give children. This is a hard place to be in. In just one verse, we've set up a domestic challenge. Okay? And we have challenges in our lives, right? You may have challenges in work, you may have challenges in school, you have challenges in your community, people in your neighborhood, but then you can leave them, right? You can go home and that world is away from you, and you don't have to deal with those struggles and those challenges as much. But when the challenge is in your house, when the challenge is in your family, when the challenge is in your marriage, there's no escape. This is your world. This is your life. This is where you are. These challenges can come in different forms. Chemical dependency can be a family challenge that you are trapped in, the situation you have challenges with. Unemployment. You lose your job. This can be devastating and worrying for a family. How are you going to provide? How are you going to make it? Pornography can be a hook into the lives and destroying in your challenges in your life. Divorce as a family gets ripped apart. It can be a huge challenge. These are kind of challenges you can't escape because they're in your home. Okay? So this is the kind of situation that we're setting up with Hannah. She is in a domestic challenge. Okay, it says each year from the hill country, in verse 3 it talks about they go from Shiloh to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice at the tabernacle there. Verse 4 says, on the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Okay, so annually we have basically a family holiday, a trip to go and worship God. This is a big and important ceremony, part of their lives. He's likely part of the family of the religious leaders, so this would be significant in his life and his world and what he wants to bring forward with his family. So we're doing this. We're going every year. And every year, he gives, probably as part of a ceremony, a portion of what we're going to give to the Lord, right? He gives it to Peninnah, and in front of Hannah, I'm sure, with her being there, he gets to see her give a portion to her and to each of her sons and daughters, which for each one is a demonstration of, this is a son you didn't give me, this is another son you didn't give me, this is a daughter you didn't give me, this is another daughter you didn't give me. These all came from someone else, right? So she has to sit through that. And then we spin it around, and Peninnah gets to see Hannah get a double portion because she has a special place in her husband's heart. So even though Peninnah is the one that is fulfilling what she thinks is her primary role, because in that culture and day, as a woman, your highest aims were to be a good wife and good mother, right? And those weren't to be separate things. You weren't supposed to be a wife or a mother. You were supposed to be a good wife and a good mother. So Peninnah is doing that. She's fulfilling what she thinks is the role, should make her husband love her, right? And yet she's seeing Hannah get a double portion, right? She was already probably the first wife, and she's getting a double portion on top of that. Though she's the one dealing with these kids, she's the one that birthed them, she's the one that is fulfilling her role, and yet Hannah gets a double portion every year in her face. So each of them have that grass is green on the other side experience, seeing the other wife, through their children or through the preference, being elevated in a way that they're not. Okay. Is this a problem? I think this next verse suggests it does. And her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. That's rough. The word there, rival, provoke grievously, really uses the same word twice, like provoke. Sort of like stick in the knife and turn it, kind of provoke, right? They use the word twice to say provoke. And to irritate is a nice word. In this translation, some say other things. From my look at the word study, the word irritate really meant to make thunder, to cause to quake. So it's a little more than just an irritation. It was, what she was doing was making Hannah seethe. She was striking her at the place where she was most vulnerable. She was a barren woman, and this woman was poking her there, saying, you can't have children. Why are you getting special favor? Every year at this traditional gathering, she was doing that to her, right? And it would cause Hannah to thunder, to tremble, to quake with frustration at what was going on. It went on year by year. As often as she went to the house of the Lord, which should be a relief, an opportunity to commune with the God, her maker, she gets this instead. This, what's supposed to be a family ritual outing, imagine Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that, turning into an annual frustration because of domestic challenges, which happens in homes, right? It becomes a source of grief because someone's not there, or it becomes a source of anxiety because there's a brokenness in your house. This is what Hannah was experiencing. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. Okay? Clearly it's a problem. I've heard examples of what's called physically induced fasting due to psychological situations. Your body will fast. You'll say, I don't have time or energy or strength or mentality or appetite to eat. I'm simply not going to, right? I don't feel like eating. Your body goes into an automatic fast mode, okay? And this is what's going on with Hannah. Clearly, she's having a problem. She has a desire for things to be different than they are, right? And we can understand that. We can see into her life how if we were in that situation or a similar situation, we would desire for our life to be different. Now, enters the husband. Elkanah, her husband, on verse 8, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Now, I've read some commentaries on that, and usually they're written by men. And they suggest that he was trying to give helpful advice. And in this situation, we should look at it and think, when we receive advice in these challenging circumstances, shouldn't we take it as well as we can and try to use the good advice to, better our situation? I'm thinking most women here would agree with me that they would not necessarily take this as the greatest advice or encouragement. That the husband says, basically, so you're barren, but you've got me. Yeah. So look at the upside, right? Because that's essentially what he's saying. Am I not worth 10 sons? Right? Look at the upside, Hannah. So this is sort of a rebuke of encouragement, right? That he's trying to give her. Do you think this fixes Hannah's problem? No. I'm not thinking it does. So it says, after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now it says they had eaten and drunk. I'm not convinced that Hannah ate. She may have pushed some food around on the plate because, after all, her husband is worth 10 sons. But I don't think he fixed her problem, because it says, Now Eli, the priest, was sitting at the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. And what was she doing? Verse 10 says, she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. Okay? Elkanah didn't fix her problem by giving her that encouragement. She's in the temple. She's weeping bitterly. Okay? This is where I believe, in the space between 10 and 11, is when our hero enters. Okay? She was praying to God. She was opening up her heart to him and saying, I can't fix this circumstance. God, you are my hope. Right? It doesn't say that there, but she is deeply distressed, and she's praying to God, and she's got to be praying about her situation and her need for a solution to it. And I believe that's where God helped her change her desire. He adjusted her perspective. He made her want something in a different way, with a different motivation. Okay? She had wanted something to fix this. A kid was going to fix her problem, to change her life. She would now have her own child. She could raise and grow up, and then in your face, Peninnah, I've got a kid too, so, we're all right now. But that isn't what she tells God she wants. She vows and says, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look at my affliction of your servant, and remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. So she's saying, give me a son, but not for me. Give me a son for you. You are the desire of my heart, Lord. You are what's important. You are the Redeemer. You're the one that gives mercy and peace and grace. Give me a son, and I will give him to you. He will not be in my house. He will be in your house all the days of his life. Right? So to me, that's a dramatic change in desire, where Peninnah is dealing with her situation, her wounds, and now she says, yes, I do want a child, but I want him for you. Her greatest yearning, she was going to turn into a sacrifice. It says in verse 12, she continued praying before the Lord. Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart. Only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. Now, they lived in a time where they weren't doing so great. The Jewish people, the temple, the sons there were doing inappropriate things. So it probably would not be uncommon for drunken people to be around and about in the temple area. So here's another one of those women who's come in here drunk and bawling, get out, right? And Eli said to her, how long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, go in peace, and the Lord God of Israel grant your petition that you have made. And she said, let your servant find favor in your eyes. Then when the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Okay. She hadn't had a son. Nothing had changed in her life. Right? She had given her burden to God. Now her face was no longer sad. She was able to eat. She had handed over her desires, her requests to God. Nothing had changed. Peninnah still had the kids. She was still a barren woman, right? The priest had just called her a drunk lady, right? But she was changed. Her situation had changed because her viewpoint, her priorities, her desire had been adjusted by God. She was not going to enjoy her life until her desires changed. Her circumstance didn't look like it was going to change. So the only thing that could change was her. It says, verse 19, they arose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel. For she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. Okay. So Samuel was born. And Samuel was going to be important. All right. We had the Jewish people were in a bad situation. They weren't following leaders. The leaders weren't good leaders to begin with. But out of the change in Hannah's desire comes an opportunity. A young man is born. Right. Hannah nurses Samuel until he's weaned. If you read the verses further, presents Samuel to the Lord with sacrifices and proclaims his greatness of God. The change in her desire changed her destiny. And you read on in chapter 2, she sings of how he opposes the proud, how he exalts the humble. Despite human evil, God is at work. And her faith that God will rise up a Messiah king. Okay? So now she has new insight, new perspective into who God is through her experience, right? And she has new revelation in the promises that he's made of who he is, and that he not only changed her life and who she is, but he is out to change the world. The Messiah will come. Okay, in chapter 2, verse 21, it says, indeed the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. We skip to verse 26. It says, now the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord, and also with man. So he grew both in the eyes of the Lord, he grew close to God, but also among the people. They recognized that he was something different. He was something of God and something special. So he was becoming in a position to bring the people closer to God. So not just Hannah's world was changing through this story, but the people in Israel, their lives are going to be changed as well. Now we have a solid man coming along that can help lead God's people out of the dark time they're going through back to him, because a broken-hearted woman allowed her desires to be changed. There's now a man who will help others to desire the God who desires them. Okay. That led me to the illustration I was thinking about. I was driving back from Allegheny. Where was I? I dropped you off. Alfred Station. Dropped her off at Alfred Station. I was driving back, and I was thinking about relationships. That's pretty important. God is about relationships. He's about restoring and restoration of broken relationships. That's between him. So relationships are really important. And I was thinking about, what do you do to build relationships? Okay? And I said, let's scale this down. Right? We've got 2-3-year-old kid. Right? Little boy, we'll say, wants to build relationship with mom. What does he do? He has access to very little in the way of resources. He doesn't have a lot of skills, talents, abilities, or even great thoughts a lot of times. But he wants to get in closer relationship with mom or dad. He wants them to be more in communication, closer to him, love him, right? It's normal, right? What might he do? Pick a flower, right? It kind of touches your heart to see a little kid pick a flower and give it to mom. Maybe draw a picture with some crayons and show dad, I made this for you, right? It isn't a great thing, right? But for what he's able to do, it's significant. It's within his capacity, right? And he is trying to build relationship by sharing in what way he can. Now think about that little boy's father. Maybe in college a few years earlier, he spies a woman that he wants to know a little bit more, right? He wants her to know him. He wants to build relationship, right? What might he do? He might pick her a flower, but he could buy her some flowers, right? Maybe take her to a park, a garden, and walk around. If she's interested, show her some things that she likes, right? He's not going to do what the 2- and 3-year-old did, because his capacity is higher. Her expectation is going to be higher because she knows who he is and what he's about. So this young man is going to do a little bit more within his capacity, within his intellect, to woo her, right? To draw her into relationship, because that's the word we use for it, to woo, right? To draw someone into a closer relationship with you. Now, had this young man been a little older, a little more established, possibly a little higher means, maybe a lot higher means. Perhaps he's independently wealthy, right? He's at the peak of his physicality, intellect. He has lots of money, and he meets a woman, and he desires to woo her. He might buy her a bouquet of flowers, right? But he's probably going to think, I can do a little more than that, right? Maybe I can buy her an island, right? If he has the capacity and the ability, he'll buy her an island of flowers, right? A place where she can go and it can be hers and a resort, because he wants to be in relationship with her. He's wooing her, and he has certain means and capacity and abilities. He's going to woo her to that extent. I thought next level might be mythological. Demigod Hercules. He was called to do, great feats. If he was wooing someone, you would expect him to slay monsters and maybe build, push mountains aside and build gardens and stuff like that in order to woo that person, because that would be his capacity, right? And then I thought, what if this guy were God? What would he do? What kind of garden would he make to try to woo me? Might it be a planet-sized garden, right? With varieties of environments from extremes, right? Might there be animals populating this garden with all kinds of crazy shapes and beautiful wonder? Might there be plant life, of various design, right? That would speak to his capacity, right? To express his love and desire for me, to be in relationship with him. Might the sky of this garden he designed to go into what appears to be infinite space with celestial, bodies surrounding it and moving in their own courses, right? His capacity would express who he is, right? He did it. It's right there. He's wooing us. He created this beautiful world because I think God could have made us globulous entities with intellect, right? Given us mush pellets in order to sustain us, stick us into a non-vacuum environment in order to provide a world for us to be in, right? And talk to us there. But our God can do better than that, right? And so he did. He expressed the best of all universes for us, the most beautiful of creations that could be created. And he did it for us because he is wooing us. He is after our hearts because I believe he wants us to trust him, right? If we don't know him, if we're not in a relationship with him, if we aren't ready to engage with him, we're not going to trust him. So when it comes to our desires, we're going to keep them to ourselves. We're going to make them our own desires, right? We know best what's for us. We're going to take care of that ourselves because who cares for us more than we do? Well, as it turns out, he does, right? So if he can woo us, if he can help us change our desire from destructive, self-loathing, damaging things to desiring him, then we can have the best life possible. That's why he's wooing us, because he loves us to begin with. That's why he made this world for us in order part of being wooing us, I believe. So like Hannah, who had desires that were tearing her apart, maybe you have desires. You have things that you want that you can't have or that you shouldn't have. And you need to hand those over to God because he loves you. He's wooing you. He's trying to draw you in a closer relationship. Today, if that is you, if you have desires that are breaking your heart, I want you to hand them over to the guy who made your heart. The guy who wants to repair your heart with his. The guy who wants to take your desires and make them what they're supposed to be. This guy's God. Amen? You're welcome.